The previous investigation established something important. The Great Pyramid did not appear from nowhere. It emerged from a civilization already capable of measurement, record-keeping, large-scale administration, specialized craft, and generations of architectural experience. But that only tells us what kind of society could attempt the monument. It does not tell us what the monument was for. Inside the pyramid, a granite box stands empty. Passages rise, descend, change direction, and close behind stone. 4 narrow shafts leave 2 different chambers. One vast internal void remained unknown until modern particle detectors revealed it. Another corridor was found behind the north face. Outside, the monument belongs to a landscape of temples, causeways, boats, cemeteries, royal architecture, and the sky itself. These features have produced very different explanations. A royal funerary monument, a celestial landscape, a prehistoric structure inherited by Khufu, a hydraulic system, a resonant machine, even a power plant. But these claims do not begin with equal evidence, and they do not ask the same question. Before we decide what the Great Pyramid was, 3 problems have to remain separate. Who created the project? What was it intended to do? And was it actually used that way? Ancient Egypt, the Great Pyramid. The first question is attribution, because if the monument was already ancient when Khufu arrived, every later argument about its purpose changes. The Great Pyramid did not stand alone in Egyptian architectural history. Before Giza, Sneferu's reign had already produced enormous pyramid projects at Meidum and Dashur. Forms changed, internal arrangements changed. The bent pyramid changed angle while it was being built. The red pyramid carried another solution across its full visible height. Whatever the exact reasons behind every change, the Great Pyramid followed an active Egyptian tradition of monumental pyramid construction, and the evidence connecting the Giza project to Khufu does not depend on one inscription. It comes from a network. The pyramid complex carried the name Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu. Marks left in construction spaces above the upper granite chamber include crew names connected with Khufu's project. At Wadi el-Jarf, papyri from Khufu's reign preserve the journal of an inspector named Merer. His crew transported fine limestone from Tura, moved it through the water network, and delivered it to Akhet Khufu while the royal project was active. Merer's journal does not tell us how the pyramid was raised. That belongs to another investigation, but it anchors people, boats, stone, schedules, and deliveries inside Khufu's building system. At Giza itself, settlements, work areas, storage, food production, administrative structures, harbors, and transport routes preserve the infrastructure of a major royal project. No single item explains the complete monument. Together, they create a tightly connected 4th dynasty context. But the stronger the attribution becomes, the more specific the alternative must become. Could Khufu simply have inherited a pyramid already thousands of years old? Ancient Egyptians reused monuments and materials, so reuse itself is not impossible. The question is what a prehistoric Great Pyramid should leave behind. If the monument's main body had already stood before dynastic Egypt, we should expect an independently identifiable earlier construction phase, a structural boundary, earlier construction material, earlier tools or waste, a separate quarrying episode, a change in building method, or a cultural layer capable of supporting a project on this scale. Radiocarbon measurements of organic material in pyramid mortar do not date the geological age of limestone. But that limitation does not create a prehistoric pyramid. It only tells us what the dating method measures. So far, no confirmed archaeological layer inside the Great Pyramid demonstrates that its main body was already standing in 10,500 BCE or in another prehistoric period. That does not make every reuse scenario logically impossible. It does something more limited. It leaves the prehistoric pyramid claim without the earlier construction phase it would need to compete with the 4th dynasty evidence. But attribution only takes us so far. A monument can belong to Khufu without every passage inside it having the same purpose. Knowing whose project this was does not tell us what the project was intended to do. For that, we have to stop looking at the pyramid as an isolated object and look at the landscape around it. The simplest modern description is familiar. The Great Pyramid was a tomb, but that sentence can be misleading in two opposite directions. It can sound more certain than the evidence allows, and much simpler than an Egyptian royal pyramid actually was. The Great Pyramid stood within a funerary and royal complex, a temple beside the pyramid, a causeway running toward the lower landscape, a valley temple zone near the water, boat pits, subsidiary pyramids, royal and elite cemeteries, spaces connected with offerings, ritual, and the continuing cult of the king. The pyramid was not discovered as an isolated geometric object, with a funerary explanation attached to it centuries later. The funerary context is built into the site. Inside the monument, the upper granite chamber contains a large granite box, widely interpreted as a sarcophagus. Its position deep inside the finished architecture makes burial a serious part of the reconstruction. Controlled access, blocking systems, the internal route, and the surrounding ritual landscape all strengthen that interpretation. But this is where language matters. Calling the Great Pyramid a funerary monument does not mean every passage existed only to transport a corpse. An Egyptian royal pyramid could combine burial, ritual, royal authority, landscape, architecture, and ideas about transformation after death. Those functions do not have to compete with one another, so the archaeological context gives us a strong explanation for the monument's broad intended role. But it immediately creates another problem. If the pyramid was intended for a royal burial, where is the burial? The granite box is empty. No confirmed mummy of Khufu has been recovered from the Great Pyramid. No surviving funerary assemblage inside the monument can be securely identified as his burial equipment. That absence is real, but its meaning is not automatic. An empty sarcophagus does not become evidence of a non-funerary building simply because the body is gone. Egyptian royal and elite tombs were robbed. Objects were removed, bodies were disturbed, damaged, moved, or reburied. Even the burial deposit associated with Khufu's mother, Hetepheres, offers a warning. Her concealed chamber at Giza contained major funerary equipment, but her alabaster sarcophagus was empty when archaeologists opened it. That does not tell us what happened to Khufu. It tells us something methodological. An empty sarcophagus cannot answer the complete question by itself. Looting cannot be used as a magic explanation either. We should not say everything missing was stolen and treat every uncertainty as solved. For the Great Pyramid, two statements must remain separate. The architecture strongly supports intended royal funerary use. Whether Khufu's body was actually placed inside, whether a burial was completed, how long anything remained there, or exactly when the interior was disturbed, cannot be reconstructed with the same confidence. Purpose and use are not identical, and that distinction changes the next question, because even if burial explains the broad archaeological context, the Great Pyramid contains features that do not reduce easily to a box for a body. The monument is oriented with extraordinary care. Its narrow shafts move through the masonry at deliberate angles. Its architecture creates relationships with direction, light, space, and the sky. So how much of this design was celestial? Start with what can actually be measured. The Great Pyramid is aligned remarkably closely with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. That was deliberate, but the fact of orientation does not tell us exactly how the builders achieved it. Researchers have proposed several surveying methods, including stellar observations. The method remains debated, and method is not meaning. A builder can use the sky to establish direction, without turning the entire monument into a map of the sky. Egyptian royal belief gave the heavens obvious importance. Solar cycles, stars, divine order, and the transformation of the king all formed part of the wider religious world in which pyramids were built. So celestial meaning does not have to compete with funerary purpose. It may be part of it. The claim becomes more demanding when it moves from general cosmic meaning to a specific geometric blueprint. Robert Bauval argued that the three principal pyramids at Giza echo the pattern of the three stars in Orion's belt. The comparison is visually suggestive, and Orion had real importance in Egyptian stellar tradition, but resemblance is only the beginning of the test. If the three pyramids were deliberately positioned as a literal map of Orion's belt, we should expect a consistent rule connecting the monuments to the stars, orientation, location, relative position, distance, scale, and preferably contemporary evidence showing that these three monuments were intended to represent those three stars. That direct confirmation has not been found. A pattern may be compatible with an astronomical interpretation without proving the intention behind it. Then the claim expands again. The Great Sphinx faces east. Its body is leonine. Robert Bauval, Graham Hancock, and others have connected this image with Leo in the sky around 10,500 BCE. A lion on Earth facing a lion in the heavens. It is a powerful image. It is not a construction date. Astronomy can reconstruct where constellations appeared in ancient skies. It cannot, by itself, date when stone was carved. Even if an intentional reference to Leo were demonstrated, several possibilities would remain. The Sphinx was carved in that period. A later culture referred symbolically to an earlier age. The date was selected because it creates a visually powerful match, or no intended match existed. A separate argument proposes that weathering around the Sphinx may indicate a much earlier origin. That debate concerns the Sphinx itself. And even if part of the Sphinx were eventually demonstrated to predate Khufu, that would not automatically date the Great Pyramid. Every structure requires its own evidence. The sky therefore adds something important to the case, but not a single answer. The cardinal orientation is deliberate. A broad celestial layer is historically plausible. Specific stellar mappings require stronger evidence. And an astronomical resemblance cannot move a monument thousands of years backward in time without an independent archaeological case. But there is another limit to every theory we have tested so far. We keep speaking as though we already know the complete object. We do not. Because parts of the Great Pyramid's internal map were discovered only in the last decade. Modern physics has revealed real spaces inside the Great Pyramid that were not part of the traditional internal map. Cosmic ray muons pass through stone. By measuring how many arrive at detectors from different directions, researchers can identify changes in density inside massive structures. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project reported a large void above the Grand Gallery. Different muon detection systems identified the same anomaly. The detected space extends for at least about 30 meters. Its existence is strongly established. Its purpose is not. Muon detectors measure density. They do not tell us whether the space was structural, constructional, ritual, protective, or something else. Later work confirmed another corridor-shaped space behind the pyramid's north face. Non-destructive measurements identified it. A small camera showed that the corridor itself exists. Once again, the discovery tells us where a space is. It does not tell us why the builders made it. This distinction matters because unknown space attracts instant explanation. A hidden burial chamber, a secret construction route, a machine component, a repository, a structural cavity. Every one of those descriptions goes beyond the detection itself. Unknown space is evidence of unknown space. Nothing more until another line of evidence connects it to a function. And that brings us to one of the most important rules in this investigation. Properties before purposes. A physical effect can be real, and the story attached to it can still be wrong. A stone chamber resonates. A massive structure absorbs and releases heat. A large object interacts with vibration and electromagnetic waves. These are physical properties. The question is whether the builders intentionally controlled one of those properties, then connected it to a working system. That requires more evidence. Take water. Water was essential to the Giza project. Mirror's records describe transport by water. Harbor and waterway evidence connects the plateau with the river system. Water moved people, supplies, and stone. But water near a pyramid does not make the pyramid a hydraulic machine. Edward Kunkel proposed that the Great Pyramid's internal passages could function as a hydraulic ram system. That is specific enough to test. If the pyramid operated as a hydraulic machine, where did the working water enter? What maintained the required pressure? Where were the valves? How was leakage controlled? Where did the water leave? What useful work did the system perform? And what traces would repeated operation leave? Mineral deposits? components, directional erosion, hydraulic shock, wear-around control components. A working hydraulic system requires a complete circuit. No confirmed intake, valve arrangement, pressure control system, continuous supply channel, and useful output have been demonstrated as one archaeological operating chain inside the Great Pyramid. Water at Giza is real. A complete hydraulic pyramid has not been demonstrated. Now consider sound. The granite chamber exhibits acoustic resonance. That is not surprising in principle. Its dimensions, openings, and stone affect how sound behaves inside it. Christopher Dunn's power plant reconstruction treats resonance as one stage in a larger energy-producing system. Again, specificity gives us something to test. What drives the vibration? What keeps it operating? What substances or components does the proposed process require? How are they introduced? What controls the reaction? Where does usable energy emerge? How is it transmitted? What receives it? If machinery was later removed, what physical traces should remain? Mountings, cuttings, residues, heat damage, corrosion, infrastructure. A complete archaeological chain from source to control, to conversion, to transmission, to use has not been demonstrated. The resonance is real. The power plant remains an unsupported leap from property to purpose. A scientific study published in 2018 created a different source of confusion. Researchers modeled how a simplified representation of the Great Pyramid responds to external electromagnetic waves in the radio frequency range. Under particular modeled conditions, electromagnetic energy concentrated in parts of the numerical structure, including regions associated with the chambers and the substrate beneath the pyramid. That result has sometimes been presented as though scientists discovered the pyramid generating energy. They did not. The model was receiving energy from outside. It scattered, focused, and redistributed an incoming electromagnetic field. Response is not generation. To turn that physical modeling result into evidence of ancient technology, we would still need evidence that the builders deliberately tuned the structure for that effect and connected it to a source, a receiver, a transmission system, and a useful application. The study tells us something about physics. It does not identify the intended purpose of the pyramid. This is the pattern that keeps returning, a real observation, followed by a much larger claim. Water becomes a pump, resonance becomes a generator, an electromagnetic response becomes a power station, a hidden void becomes whichever chamber a theory needs. The correct test is not whether the property exists. The correct test is whether the complete system required by the interpretation exists in the evidence. And when we apply that rule, the archaeological funerary reconstruction explains far more of the surrounding pattern than the machine reconstructions do, but it still does not explain every feature. The celestial evidence adds possible meaning without establishing a literal blueprint. The machine claims identify real properties without closing their operating systems. The unknown spaces remain unknown. So perhaps the next mistake would be forcing the entire pyramid under any single label. There is one group of features that makes that problem impossible to ignore: 4 narrow shafts. They are often called air shafts. That name sounds simple. 4 narrow passages, one obvious function, ventilation, but the architecture refuses to cooperate. 2 shafts associated with the upper granite chamber reach the exterior in the pyramid as it survives today. The 2 shafts connected with the chamber, traditionally called the Queen's Chamber, are different. Their openings into the chamber were originally concealed behind masonry. They were not simple open ducts from the room to the outside, and robotic exploration made the difference even harder to ignore. The southern shaft from the Queen's Chamber is only about 20 centimeters across. Robotic missions followed it deep into the masonry. Near its upper end, a blocking stone appears with copper fittings. The JD robot later passed a small camera through an opening. Behind that first stone, the camera revealed a short space, red markings, and another blocking stone beyond it. That discovery did not reveal a treasure chamber. It did not prove an astronomical pathway. It did not reveal machinery, but it established something more useful. This shaft, in its completed architectural form, was not simply an open ventilation tube, and the 4 shafts cannot automatically be treated as 4 identical components, performing one identical task. That changes the question. Perhaps some features had different functions. Perhaps function changed during construction. Perhaps some were symbolic. Perhaps some served temporary construction needs. Perhaps several roles overlapped. We do not yet know. And that is precisely the point. The shafts do not solve the Great Pyramid. They expose the danger of demanding that the monument have one simple function, repeated through every feature. A funerary monument can contain engineering. Architecture can carry ritual meaning. A passage can possess a physical property without being an industrial machine. And similar-looking features do not have to share an identical purpose. The evidence has not produced one master label that makes every uncertainty disappear. It has done something more valuable. It has narrowed the field. This is where the evidence has taken us today. The Great Pyramid sits firmly inside a 4th dynasty royal project associated with Khufu. Its surrounding archaeological landscape gives the funerary reconstruction substantial weight. Burial was very likely part of the monument's intended role. Whether Khufu's burial was actually completed inside remains unresolved. The monument's relationship with the cardinal directions is deliberate. A broader cosmic dimension fits the royal and ritual context, but literal stellar maps require evidence beyond visual resemblance. The Sphinx may preserve questions of its own. Those questions cannot date the Great Pyramid by association. Water moved through the Giza landscape. Stone chambers resonate. Numerical models reveal electromagnetic behavior. None of those observations has yet produced the complete operating chain required for a hydraulic or power-generating pyramid, and modern scanning has shown that even our map of the interior remains incomplete. The archaeological reconstruction is strongly grounded. The unresolved features are also real. One does not erase the other, and neither allows us to close the larger investigation here. But purpose has now created another problem. Every chamber, every shaft, every blocking stone, every granite element, every hidden space had to become part of the monument, while the monument was physically rising. The granite did not appear inside a completed pyramid. The passages did not cut themselves through finished masonry. The shafts had to maintain their paths, course after course. Whatever the builders intended, they still had to build the complete system, stone by stone, level by level, while preserving geometry, internal space, access, and stability. That is the next investigation. Not what the Great Pyramid meant, but how the complete monument became physically possible. Building the Great Pyramid.